she is introduced to a simple plumber, not knowing that he is the most powerful CEO in the city. Hello everyone. Before we get started today, I have a small favor to ask. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video on our channel. Your support means a lot to us. Where are you watching from? Leave your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. It's Friday night, and the city outside the restaurant windows glows with the kind of golden light that makes everything look a little more romantic and a little more dangerous. Emma Davis, 31, adjusts the strap of her thrift store dress, feeling absurdly nervous for a date she never wanted to attend. Her best friend insisted she needed a decent man who knows what it means to work with his hands. When the door opens, the man who walks in doesn't fit the picture she had in mind. He's tall, quietly confident, dressed in dark jeans and a plain gray shirt. There's a faint roughness to him, stubble on his jaw, calloused fingers. But his posture is too steady, too deliberate, as if he belongs somewhere grander than a neighborhood diner. "Emma?" he asks, his voice deep and calm. She nods, half smiling. "You must be Alex the plumber?" He chuckles softly, pulling out a chair. "That's me. Though I usually fix pipes that scream louder than I do. It's a small joke, but it works." The tension eases. Over coffee and pasta that's slightly overcooked, they talk about everything and nothing. Books, travel dreams, even their shared dislike for people who talk too loud in restaurants. Emma finds herself surprised. Most men she's dated talk about themselves endlessly. This one listens. His eyes, steel gray but kind, study her not like a man assessing beauty, but like someone trying to understand. She tells him about her mother's illness, her overworked life at the marketing firm, the fear of falling behind on bills. He doesn't flinch. "You're stronger than you think," he says simply. For a second, she believes him. There's something magnetic about his stillness, something that feels familiar, but she shakes the thought away. He's just a plumber. A kind, mysterious plumber who seems out of place in a cheap Italian restaurant. As the evening winds down, she realizes she doesn't want it to end. When they step outside, snow has started to fall. Light, quiet, the kind that turns city noise into silence. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asks. She hesitates, then nods. His voice carries warmth that the winter air can't steal. At the corner, they stop. "Thank you for dinner," she says, smiling faintly. "You're different from what I expected." He tilts his head, amused. "Different good or different bad?" "Different good." He grins, just a little, and she notices how genuine it is. He looks like a man who doesn't smile often, but means it when he does. Then, before she can ask for his number, a server from the restaurant rushes out, holding something. "Sir, you forgot your card." He takes it with a polite nod. On the black card, printed in silver letters, is the name Alexander Wolf. Emma doesn't notice, but the camera of fate does. Because the man she just called Alex the plumber is the billionaire CEO who owns half the city. The morning after the blind date, Emma wakes to the familiar creak of her old apartment's radiator and the sound of her mother coughing softly in the next room. The city outside is gray and busy, but inside their two-bedroom home, the world feels small, measured in medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter and the ticking clock above the stove. Emma Davis has learned to survive by staying practical. She works long hours at a marketing firm that underpays and overpromises, juggling deadlines by day and caring for her mother by night. Her reflection in the mirror shows a woman who used to dream, but now calculates rent in grocery receipts. There was a time she believed in love. That ended when her ex-fiancé, an investment broker, walked out the same week she lost her savings in his joint venture. Since then, she's had one rule: never trust a man who has more money than empathy. That's why she said yes to the blind date only because her best friend begged her to. A plumber, she had thought. At least he'll be honest. And he was, or at least he seemed to be. There was something disarmingly real about the way Alex looked at her, like he saw through the exhaustion without pitying her for it. But what Emma doesn't know is that Alex Wolf isn't really a plumber. Miles away, in a penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Alexander Wolf stands before a floor-to-ceiling window, coffee in hand, watching his reflection fade against the sunrise. The man the world knows as Wolf, the ruthless CEO who rebuilt an empire from ashes, is thinking about a woman who believed he fixed leaking pipes. Alexander grew up in a one-room apartment above a mechanic's shop. His father worked 3 jobs, his mother cleaned houses uptown. He remembers hunger, humiliation, and the way rich people looked at his parents, as if they were invisible. That memory carved something hard inside him. He fought his way up through scholarships, long nights, and betrayal. When he finally became someone the city respected, he realized respect came with a price. Distrust. Friends wanted favors. Lovers wanted luxury. No one wanted him, so he built walls, not homes. His boardrooms were battlefields, and his life, an endless negotiation. Until last night, the blind date wasn't supposed to mean anything. His assistant had convinced him to take a night off, saying her cousin knew someone. A genuine woman, not from your world. He almost canceled, then thought, what if, just once, I could meet someone who doesn't flinch at the word wolf? And so Alexander Wolf became Alex, the quiet plumber. But something unexpected happened. Emma didn't just listen, she cared. Not because of who he was, but because of who he seemed to be. Now, standing in his penthouse, he feels the tug of a question he hasn't asked himself in years. Could anyone ever love me without knowing my name? The game had begun as an experiment, but as he recalls the way she smiled across that tiny restaurant table, Alexander knows one thing. He's already losing control of it. For the next few weeks, their worlds quietly intertwine. Emma starts looking forward to the evenings, the small rituals that make life feel less heavy. Alexander, or rather Alex, always picks her up in his old borrowed pickup truck. They drive to the edge of the city, where streetlights fade into soft gold, and talk for hours about everything except money, ambition, or success. With him, Emma feels something she hasn't felt in years, safety without pretense. Alex listens when she talks about her mother's hospital bills, or her fear of never being enough. He doesn't try to fix her problems. He just listens, his gaze steady and kind. He learns that she likes her coffee with too much sugar, and that she hums when she's nervous. She learns that he can cook surprisingly well, and that he reads poetry when he can't sleep. Everything about him seems simple, grounded, human, and that's exactly what she needs. But behind the soft smiles and late-night phone calls, Alexander Wolf lives two lives. By day, he's back in the marble corridors of Wolf Enterprises, negotiating mergers, silencing competitors, commanding respect through fear. No one there would believe that the city's most intimidating CEO spends his nights laughing over takeout boxes in a tiny apartment with a woman who thinks he unclogs drains for a living. Every time his assistant brings him a stack of contracts to sign, Alexander's mind drifts to Emma's laughter, her hands stained with paint from fixing her kitchen shelf. He feels lighter with her, yet every moment of happiness tightens the knot of guilt inside him. He tells himself it's harmless, that she deserves peace, not pressure, that revealing the truth now would only destroy what little good he's finally found. But when she looks at him with quiet affection, saying things like, "You make the world feel less cruel," the lie starts to burn. One evening, as they walk through the park, Emma slips her arm through his and says softly, "I don't care if you're not rich, Alex. I just want someone who stays when life gets hard." He stops for a second, caught between wanting to confess and wanting to preserve this fragile illusion. Instead, he says only, "Then I'll stay." It becomes their silent promise, an unspoken agreement of hearts. Emma believes she's found a good, honest man who sees her for who she is. Alexander silently vows never to let her feel abandoned or betrayed again. But the more real their love becomes, the heavier his secret grows, because love built on a lie, no matter how pure, always waits for the truth to tear it apart. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Emma was in the office pantry, pouring herself a cup of coffee, when the muted TV on the wall caught her attention. The screen showed the host of City Business Weekly, announcing, "Wolf Enterprises has finalized a record-breaking merger under the leadership of its reclusive CEO, Alexander Wolf." The camera cut to a shot of him walking through a marble hallway. Black suit, silver tie, bodyguards at his side, and there it was. That unmistakable face, that quiet, composed walk, that same gaze she'd come to know by heart. Her hand trembled, the cup slipping slightly from her grip. Hot coffee splashed onto her wrist, but she didn't even flinch. The world around her blurred as the truth sank in. Alex was Alexander Wolf. The man who made her laugh in a diner at midnight was the billionaire everyone feared. By the time he called that evening, she couldn't bring herself to answer. His name flashing on her screen felt like a cruel joke. When he finally showed up at her apartment, Emma stood still at the door, face pale and unreadable. "You lied to me," she said quietly, the words shaking more from disbelief than anger. Alexander took a step forward. "Emma, please, just let me explain." She folded her arms, forcing out a bitter laugh. "Explain what? That the man I've been seeing doesn't even exist? That all those nights, all those words, were just part of your experiment?" His expression broke, the carefully built calm crumbling. "It wasn't like that," he said softly. I wanted to know what it felt like to be loved without the title, without the fear. To be seen for who I am, not what I own." Emma's eyes glistened. "You could have trusted me with the truth." "I wanted to," he whispered. "But the more I loved you, the more terrified I became of losing you." For a moment, silence filled the room. Heavy, suffocating. Then she shook her head slowly. "You already lost me, Alexander." Her voice cracked on his real name, as if saying it made the betrayal more real. She turned away before the tears could fall, reaching for the door. He hesitated, his hand twitching like he might reach out, then lowered it. "Emma, please." But she didn't look back. The door closed softly, leaving him standing in the hallway, surrounded by everything money could buy, except the one thing it couldn't fix. That night, Alexander sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he no longer wanted. He had the power to control markets, silence rivals, and shape fortunes. Yet he couldn't control the single truth echoing in his mind. He had all the power in the world, but none of it could make her stay. Winter came and went, but for Emma, every season still felt cold. She woke before dawn, took 2 buses to work, and came home to a small apartment that smelled faintly of medicine and peppermint tea. Her mother's illness had worsened, the hospital bills stacking like bricks on her chest. Yet Emma kept her head high, quiet, determined, uncomplaining. There were nights when exhaustion broke through her composure. She would sit by her mother's bedside, whispering, "Just a little longer. Mom, I'll make it through." And somehow, the world seemed to answer. When the hospital demanded an immediate payment she couldn't afford, the bill mysteriously disappeared the next morning, stamped paid in full. When her apartment's heater broke during the first frost, a new one was delivered the same day, anonymous order, no sender listed. Even the florist downstairs occasionally sent lilies, her mother's favorite, with a note that simply read, "For strength." Emma knew who it was, but she refused to let herself believe it. Because if it was Alexander Wolf, the man who lied, the man she once loved, then believing meant reopening the wound she'd fought so hard to heal. Across the city, in a skyscraper of glass and steel, Alexander watched from behind tinted windows. Every night, his assistant left a sealed envelope on his desk. Medical updates, small notes about her life, nothing more. He never asked for photos, never crossed the line. He only made sure she had what she needed. He could have called. He could have gone to her. But guilt kept him silent. Guilt for every lie, every moment he'd let fear win over honesty. His empire thrived again. The board praised him, the media worshipped him, but none of it mattered. Each victory felt hollow when he returned to an empty penthouse and saw her handwriting still etched on an old note. Real happiness doesn't need to be bought. One evening, he stood on his balcony, city lights glowing beneath the falling snow. He lifted a glass of whiskey to his lips but didn't drink. Instead, he whispered into the night, "I'm still here, Emma, even if you'll never see me again." Meanwhile, Emma stared out the hospital window at the same skyline, a feeling tugging deep in her chest, the strange, comforting sense that someone out there still cared. But care wasn't enough. Not when the past still stood like a wall between them, built of secrets, silence, and a love that neither could forget, yet neither dared to claim again. The invitation arrived on cream-colored stationery, embossed with gold letters. The Grayson Wolf Foundation Charity Gala, a night for hope. Emma almost threw it away. She'd been volunteering with a small literacy program, and her supervisor insisted she attend, said it would open doors. She didn't know the man behind the foundation, until she saw his name printed at the bottom. Alexander Wolf, chairman. Her heart stilled. For a long moment, the only sound in her apartment was the slow ticking of the wall clock. She should have said no, but something inside her whispered, "Face it." The ballroom glittered that night, filled with men in tuxedos and women in diamonds. Emma, in her simple navy dress, felt out of place among them. She kept to the corners, pretending to admire the art pieces, praying no one would notice her trembling hands. But Alexander saw her the instant she walked in. Across the room, their eyes met, and time, cruel and forgiving, folded in on itself. He moved toward her, parting the crowd without hesitation. Every step was slow, deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers. When he stopped in front of her, the world around them seemed to fall away. "Emma." His voice was lower than she remembered, steadier, but laced with something raw. She looked away. "I shouldn't have come." He took a quiet breath. "Then I'm glad you did." She tried to walk past him, but his words stopped her. I need you to hear the truth. Not the one the world knows, not the one I hid behind. Emma froze, eyes fixed on the floor. I lied because I was afraid. Alexander said softly, I've spent my whole life being used, for money, for power, for what my name could give. When I met you, you were the first person who didn't care about any of that, and I didn't want to lose it. I didn't want to lose you. Emma's throat tightened. So instead you lied and lost me anyway. He nodded, pain flickering in his eyes. Yes, and it's the one mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life. Silence stretched between them, heavy, fragile, real. Then, quietly, Emma said, Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't that you were rich or powerful. It was that you didn't think I could love you either way. He looked at her, eyes glistening. I know that now. And if I could go back, you can't, she interrupted gently. Neither of us can. He swallowed hard. Then let me go forward. With honesty. With you, her breath caught. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire who ruled half the city, but the man who once sat across from her, laughing over cheap coffee and broken trust. Tears welled in her eyes. I tried to hate you, she whispered, but I couldn't. Because the truth is, I never stopped loving you. Alexander's composure broke. He reached for her hand, hesitant, as if afraid she'd vanish. When she didn't pull away, he exhaled, trembling. No applause. No audience. Just two people finally saying everything they hadn't before. The music swelled, soft and distant, as Emma leaned her head slightly toward him. Forgiveness didn't come with grand gestures. It came quietly, in the warmth of a shared silence that said, We can begin again. Weeks passed after the gala. For once, the name Alexander Wolf no longer filled headlines about mergers or billion-dollar deals. Instead, journalists wrote of the CEO who stepped back. Alexander had quietly resigned from his executive seat at Wolf Capital, leaving his board stunned. His statement was simple. For years, I built empires. Now, I just want to build a life that means something. He no longer wore the armor of tailored suits or the chill of control. The world saw a different man. One who smiled easier, spoke softer, and seemed almost human. Emma heard about it on the news, disbelief mixing with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A week later, she received a text. Riverside Cafe. 6 p.m. Same table. Her heart raced as she entered the cafe that had witnessed their beginning. And their biggest lie. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and faint nostalgia. At the corner table by the window, Alexander was already there, dressed in a simple shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, no guards, no luxury watch, just him. When he looked up, his smile was the same. But his eyes no longer hid behind walls. Emma took the seat across from him, the same one she'd chosen months ago when she thought he was just a plumber with kind eyes. The silence between them was different now. Not awkward, not painful, just filled with everything they'd survived. Alexander was the first to speak. I sold the penthouse, he said, almost shyly. Bought a small house near the park, closer to your school, and closer to the life I actually want. Emma smiled faintly. So, no more bodyguards and chauffeurs? He shook his head. Just a man who finally figured out what really matters. The waitress placed 2 cups of coffee on the table. Black for him, latte for her, just like the first night. Steam rose between them, curling like the faint line between past and present. Emma's voice was quiet. This time, no secrets. Alexander held her gaze, and for once, it didn't carry the weight of a billion-dollar name. Only truth. No secrets, he whispered. Then softly, just us. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the cafe windows. It spilled across their joined hands, warm and steady. Neither spoke again. They didn't need to. The hum of soft jazz filled the space as they sat side by side. 2 souls who had learned that love wasn't about saving or testing each other, but about seeing and staying, even after the truth. Through the glass, the city glowed in the distance, but inside the cafe, everything was still. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, and as the light faded into a soft amber hue, it wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of something real.